This is Jonathan Aggoff here for Pro Boxing Fans. We're down here in Epping today at the new home of the Peacock Gym. Delighted to be joined by Hall of Fame promoter Frank Warren. Frank, what do you make of the new surroundings? Impressive.
Oh, they're fantastic, aren't they? State of the art. And Tony and Martin Bowers have done a brilliant job here in building this. It's just that, for the fighters, what an environment to train in.
How important has this move been? I mean, a lot of your stable are at the Peacock Gym in terms of sort of nurturing that young talent, including the man behind you, Daniel Dubois. An important move in your opinion?
Well, I think it's an important move. Now, Tony and Martin own the gym. It's their gym and their land and property, and they train a number of fighters that we work. Well, nearly all their fighters work with us, have contracts with us, and I'm delighted. Shows you their commitment to the boxers that they've built this facility.
What are your main memories from the old Peacock Gym? A lot of fighters have been there, gone, champions. What do you mainly remember? Exactly
what you said. A lot of fighters have been through those doors. Famous fighters worked there over the years. It's a landmark in the East End. One of the, when you think all the gyms that have gone and disappeared, their gym was probably the most famous gym down there, and it's still a marvellous facility down there. But they moved on to here now. I think now, obviously the Peacock in the East End is still working, but I think this is where they'll be working in the future.
In the East End on Saturday night, we've got Daniel Dubois against Ricardo Schneiders. The opponent did change from Eric Pfeiffer. Can you just clarify what happened?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've not got it with me, but I showed the papers on a couple of websites yesterday. Basically, we've done a double deal with the German promoters for Wallish to fight Joyce and Pfeiffer to fight Daniel Dubois. Wallish provided his full medicals before he came in. You remember we had a press conference about 8 weeks ago, whenever it was. He came in with the correct medicals. They then sent us last Monday Pfeiffer's medicals, and instead of an MRI scan, they said they send in an MRA, which is not sufficient for the boxing law to control, and therefore it put us in a terrible position where we'd have to push the fight back. We couldn't risk that, even if whether he pass it or fail it, it would put Daniel in a position where we couldn't be too late to get another opponent. So we moved on, and the other guy was in training, and we jumped on him, Schneider, and that's what it is. I couldn't put the fight back because Daniel's got to fight Saturday to enable, provided he won the fights, or wins this fight, to enable him to be ready to fight on October the 24th against Joyce. So their incompetence cost Pfeiffer that position. They should have got the right paperwork in, and if you want to go to my office, you're quite welcome to see what they sent through. Plus, we never got the contract back.
With that Joyce fight looming, how important? It doesn't seem to me like Daniel really ever takes his eye off the ball, but especially with that fight so close now, is there any pressure going into Saturday night for Dan?
I think there's pressure from him, but he's not the type. He's not thinking of Joyce. All he's thinking of Saturday. He's very focused and single-minded. He's a man of a few words. He does all his talking in the ring, and that's all he focuses on. He doesn't even mention it to me. In fact, he never mentions any opponents to me. It's just not in his head. All it is like, I'm in now, seek and destroy, and that's where he's at. That's his mentality.
How does it compare working with Daniel to the likes of maybe a Frank Bruno, for example?
Well, all guys have got different personalities. Frank was a very personal guy, a thorough professional. Trained really. They got the same work ethic as far as training is concerned. But Frank was more. He sort of was quite outgoing, whereas Daniel's quite introverted. He's not. I liken him to the first coming of George Foreman and Sonny Liston. They didn't really have a lot to say. They did all their talking in the ring, and what they did in the ring, they did in style.
Also on the bill, Sonny Edwards against Thomas Asomba, former Olympian. What kind of test is this for Sonny? And if he does come through, he's got high ratings in both flyweight and super flyweight. So possible eliminator for a world title?
I think it's a tough fight. I want to get Sonny a world title fight this year if I can. But what I've noticed, and I've mentioned it before, in this lockdown situation, or these behind closed door fights, is all the opponents. You seem to be getting more out of them. And I think the reason is because they're going to a sterile atmosphere where there's no home crowd behind the home. Sonny's the home fighter for us, if you know what I mean. So there's no crowd behind the home fight. So they're getting more out of them. There's no, they're not going into the lion's den.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to get a cracking fight on Saturday.
Well, we saw that a bit in your last show with the likes. Who do we have? Troy Williamson and Archie Sharp. Yeah.
Archie Sharp, and a couple of fights they've had on Matchroom have been the same thing. So I think these opponents, I think they're they're not. I'm not saying they would be phased anyway, but I think you're getting a bit more out of them.
Good to see David Adelaide back. He's like a fast-rising heavyweight, still very young.
He is. It's his third fight. What I found amazing on BT YouTube, he's had nearly 4 million views. So they like him. They keep watching him and tuning and looking at him. He's a young man who's again very focused, very dedicated. He's a young man in a hurry, so we've got to temper that and bring him along at the right rate. But he looks like he's got a great future ahead of him.
And what about Willie Hutchinson and Sam Noakes also making up the bill?
Well, Willie, hopefully he comes through on Saturday, and I want to see Willie in a position where he's fighting for a title this year. He needs now to be stepped up. Big problem for me has been, whether he's a super middleweight or he's a light heavyweight. So we'll determine what that is on Saturday. And Sam Noakes is he's an exciting fighter, isn't he? I mean, he's a very exciting fighter. I'm looking forward to seeing him back in action.
Just away from the car for a moment, obviously on Saturday night we saw quite a big upset, I guess, Povetkin knocking out Dillian Whyte. What was your instant reaction to seeing that?
Well, I was pleased in as much from Tyson's perspective and getting Tyson in with Anthony Joshua. It got rid of an obstacle. Being very honest about it, it was a shame for Dillian, but I don't know what he was doing in there in the first place. He's a mandatory challenger. What's he having a fight? Why was he taking that fight? This guy's been around, was it in the number one spot, BO or BC, IBF, a final eliminator, which he didn't take for 1,000 days. I mean, what happened? That's 3 years nearly. Why Disney fight? It's been a promoter who had the world champion, had him in the number one spot with the WBO. Why hasn't it happened? Why has he been doing these fights? And in all these fights, what I've noticed, he's been on the floor, he's shown a lot of heart and got up, been in some good fights. But for me, I always felt that anybody who clips him will take him out, and that's why I fancied the fight with him and Daniel.
Tyson Fury said that if Daniel Dubois was in there, he believes that he would have knocked Dillian Whyte out as well. Are you on that talk as well?
That's why we put it out that we wanted to make the fight. Dillian had come through his fight, and Daniel or Joe comes through their fight. The winner of that would have been a great fight to make between the two of them. Or, as I said, make Joe with Chisora. They're great fights for the fans. Let's find out who the best are.
Maurizio Sulaiman, WBC president, said that there's no obligations now for Tyson Fury should he come through Deontay Wilder. Do you expect to push through with the Joshua fight? I know Bob Arum's saying he expects Pulev to knock Joshua out. But, where do you see the whole situation going into that AJ Fury fight?
Bob obviously wants Pulev to win. I don't. I want to see Anthony. I'm an AJ man. I'm in that corner. I want to see him come through. I wish he weren't fighting because we've seen what's happened with him against Ruiz. But I hope he comes through it, and then let's get that fight. We knocked an obstacle out of the way. One's gone. And that was Dillian Whyte. That mandatory situation is gone now. So I want to see our man Tyson, because I believe in him, in with AJ. And all the fans want that fight. That's the fight we all want to see. So let's make it happen. Let's get rid of all the obstacles. Stop keep talking about, leg ups and helping people out. I don't need anyone to help me out. Tyson, I believe in Tyson Fury. He's the best heavyweight in the world. There's no doubt about that. I don't know whether they believe in their man, because all they see, every conversation I heard, certainly from Barry Hearn over the weekend, it's all about money. It's all about, money, and that tells you where he's at. He doesn't want to lose his cash cow. He doesn't want that fight to happen. That's where their mentality is. And I've said all along, they don't fancy it. I'm not saying Anthony Joshua don't fancy it. I'm saying Matchroom don't fancy the fight. We do. We believe in our man. Matchroom, do you believe in yours?
One further obstacle could be the WBO mandatory and Alexander Usyk. Is there any conversations you yourselves and Bob Arum may look at?
Well, I don't think that's our problem. That problem is with Matchroom. They've got both the fighters. I mean, they might have a conflict of interest. They had a conflict of interest with Whyte. Whyte was number one, and suddenly their man went in over him, so he lost his number one position in the WBO. That's their problem. Do you know what, though? Forget the belts. Just make the fight. Make the fight between the guys. No one's buying a ticket to look at belts. I'd love to see the 4 belts on the line. It's never happened before, especially 2 Brits. Nothing bigger than that. But forget the belts. Let's get the fight on. No one's, as I say, you're not buying a ticket to look at a belt. You're buying to look at these 2 guys, 2 British, top of the world fighters against each other. Who's the best? Let's get it on and see.
Wilder Fury 3. Has there been any conversations with Team Wilder, Shelley Finkel, about when this fight could happen, Frank?
No, we're all at the moment, we're all in the hands of trying to find a venue or a site that will put the money up. You know, as you know, it was the highest grossing heavyweight fight in history of Vegas, the fight in February. So we've got to get that gate money from somewhere to make it viable to get the fight on so the guys get well paid. That's a struggle at the moment. So we're hoping, we've had some offers coming from around the world. We want to get that fight on, and the proposed date is December. And if we can't, we've got to look at see what we can do for Tyson, because he wants to fight this year.
Just lastly on this, Deontay Wilder, Floyd Mayweather came out and said that he would offer to train Deontay Wilder. Tyson Fury says there's nothing that Mayweather would be able to do to change anything. What's your thoughts on that offer?
I hope he does. It'll make it more spicy, and it'll make it more satisfying when Tyson does the same thing as he did last time.
Fair enough. Just lastly, Frank, just a couple of updates on a couple of your fighters. Anthony Yard and Liam Williams. I've heard a few rumours that there's an impending announcement.
Well, there will be an impending announcement. Hopefully we will make it, I believe, tomorrow.
Jack Catterall, I know you announced the Josh Taylor card. You mentioned Jack Kattar as a possible future opponent. Is there any new update on him? I know he's waiting on that mandatory.
We're waiting to see what happens with this mandatory. We've written to the WBO and we're waiting for a response regarding what is happening with that. I know the champion's is supposed to be fighting, and we want to immediately go straight to that, straight afterwards to Jack.
And one final one off the top of my head, Tommy Fury. Is there any update on when he may return?
I hope he'll be out this year. You know, we're talking to his dad John, and fingers crossed we can sort something out. I'd love to see him back in the ring. He's exciting.
Definitely. All right, Frank. Thanks very much for talking to pro boxing fans. Look forward to Saturday night.